intrauterine devices. Now what remaining part is implants. Implants and permanent methods of sterilization, both male and the female. So today we are going to discuss this subdermal implants. So basically these subdermal implants are basically small rods which is containing the hormones which is getting released into your body. So now implants, what is the difference between these implants and IUDs? IUDs are more suitable for older multiparous women, and most importantly LNG IUS, the intrauterine system, what advantage of this IUS, LNG IUS was that it was releasing the hormone locally, that is inside the uterine cavity, it was not having any systemic side effects. But here, and another advantage of implants is there are no chances of plaque-built inflammatory diseases. But in case of IUDs, what happened? You are inserting inside the uterine cavity, so there is chance of PID. So that is the main advantage of implants. And the cost, but disadvantage of implants is the cost is high as compared to that of the IUDs, but it is cost effective as compared to the implants. And for implants, what happens? You need a proper training for its insertion as well as for its removal. For IUD, the such proper training is not required. Now for implants, what are the hormones that are being released? One is the levonorgestrel containing implants, one is etonorgestrel containing implants. So LNG containing implants are Norplant. Just remember one name, Norplant. One example, if they ask you the implant containing LNG or levonorgestrel, use name Norplant. And etonorgestrel containing implant is Implanon and Nexplanon. You just remember the names. Now what is the difference between these two? Both are basically biologically active progesterone, and both are, since they are progesterones only, so what is their mechanism of action? Again, if you are giving progesterone as a contraception, this hormone acts by what mechanism? A thickening of the cervical, main mechanism of thickening of the cervical mucus, which prevents the penetration of the sperms, followed by atrophy of the endometrium, followed by inhibition of the ovulation. So difference between this LNG and etonorgestrel is the serum levels of etonorgestrel is less shows less individual variation over time as compared to LNG levels. Nothing, and etonorgestrel is more potent than that of the levonorgestrel. So when we are asking you why Implanon or why Nexplanon, because the Implanon or Nexplanon is having etonorgestrel. Etonorgestrel is more potent than LNG, as well as it shows less individual variation over time. Now levonorgestrel containing implants are Norplant and ZL. These two examples you need to remember. So in case of Norplant contains 6 rods. See, there are 6 rods containing levonorgestrel. What are the parts? See, thin walled silicon tubing is there, levonorgestrel crystals are there inside this tube, and silicon adhesive is used to seal both the ends. It consists of 6 flexible rods, each containing 36 mg of levonorgestrel. This line you have to remember, 6 flexible rods containing 36 mg of levonorgestrel, and each capsule is 34 mm long. This capsule is 34 mm long with a diameter of 2.4. And what is this, till how many years it can be used? It prevents pregnancy for 5 years. These 3 sentences are very important. So it contains 6 rods. Inside the rod it contains how many grams of levonorgestrel? 36. And it is used for 5 years for prevention of pregnancy. Whereas this ZL contains only 2 rods. These 2 rods are basically inserted in a V-shaped manner here over the shoulder, and it also contains levonorgestrel, which is released at the rate of 80 mcg per day in the first month, 50 mcg per day by 9 months, and then 25 to 30 mcg per day. They are inserted in a V-shaped manner. See, and total core contains 75 mg, and it contains 36 mg. They contain 75 mg. this both can be used for 5 years, up to 5 years. This ZL is also for 5 years and this Norplant is also for 5 years. Only difference is 6 rods, this is 2 rods. It contains 36 and this contains 75. You can remember like this, 6 for 6, 6 rods and 36 mg of levonorgestrel, 6 for 6. Now we are coming to implanon and nexplanon. What is the difference between this implanon and nexplanon? What was the difference? Norplant and ZL contain what? LNG, levonorgestrel, and these two contain etonorgestrel, which is more potent, right? So implanon and nexplanon nowadays commonly these two are used. So implanon is a single rod implant that is releases etonorgestrel and prevents pregnancy for 3 years. They were used for 5 years and these two are used for 3 years. These are government implications that it can be used for 3 years. After that, what happens? The release rate of the drugs becomes very erratic. After that, it can be kept, but we don't know about the release rate. Till 3 years, we know this much of mcg of the drug is released per day. But after that, the release rate becomes erratic. That's why we say, even if it is potent, that we, and for that matter, see, for this we used to have 6 rods. For this we have 2 rods. For this we use only 1 rod, right? That is what the amount of the hormone we use is less, but amount of contraception efficacy we are getting is more. So that means what, the molecule is more potent. That is why. So it releases 35 to 45 mcg per day in the first year and 30 to 40 mcg per day in the second year. And initially, see, this is the thing, initially the serum levels of etonorgestrel rapidly rises to the mean serum level of 265 by within 8 hours. That is far above the level of 90 picogram per ml, which is needed to prevent ovulation. This means what? Etonorgestrel is so potent that within 8 hours it reaches such a peak level in your blood that it can prevent ovulation by 8 hours. Maximum serum concentrations are usually seen by day 4 after the implant insertion. So that is why after removal also the serum levels are undetectable, and by 1 week majority of the users, with most of the women, demonstrate ovulation within 6 weeks of implant removal. So if we ask you why we are going for this implanon or nexplanon, because it is containing etonorgestrel, it is more potent version, less individual variation per day release, as well as even after removal within 6 weeks there is return of ovulation, that is return of fertility, and even within insertion of within 4 days of insertion there is maximum serum concentration which can prevent your ovulation. That is why we are more focusing on this implanon and nexplanon. Nexplanon is also, both are having, implanon and nexplanon are bioequivalent, both release the same drug. And what is the difference between these two? These two releases in etonorgestrel only. Only the better thing about nexplanon is it can be seen on X-ray, CT scan, MRI, therefore easier to locate. After it has been inserted, you have to locate. After 3 years you have to remove it. Then how will you have to keep on palpating, right? But since this contains the addition of this barium sulfate, which makes it radio opaque, that is why you can easily trace or locate this nexplanon using CT, MRI, or even a simple X-ray can detect it. And how will you insert? What is the ideal time for insertion? For women without any preceding hormone use, etonorgestrel containing implants can be inserted within 5 days from the start of the menses. For all the hormone containing pills, what we have learned? That within 5 days of menstruation, when the chances of getting pregnancy is less or rather nil, without doing an urinary pregnancy test also, we can very well go for IUCD insertion, we can very well go for COCP's start, as well as we can go for insertion of these implants as well. And when switching for an oral contraceptive pill, suppose the patient was taking COCPs, but now she has come, okay fine, I don't want to take COCPs, I want for a better, longer method of contraception where I don't have to take pill daily. Then what happens? We have to tell that while switching from the oral pills, insertion should occur within 5 days of the last active pill. Suppose 2 days she has taken, then within 7 days we have to insert the implant. Implants may be inserted within 5 days of the first trimester abortion, within 6 of the second trimester abortion, or within 6 weeks of childbirth. So now as we can see, how will you insert? First locate the insertion site. Then see there is an applicator being positioned parallel to the skin, and then the needle is inserted and there is deposition of the implant. And how will you remove it? Palpate the rod. See, here we have to palpate the rod, but once we are using this Nexplanon, it was what? Radio opaque, you can locate it, then make an incision over here, a small incision, grabs the rod with a forceps and then remove the rods. This is very simple and this is the way you can remove the implant. This was all about implants. We have studied injectable, that was DMPA, now we have studied implants. Now coming to the permanent methods of contraception. So what are the permanent methods of contraception? First comes the female sterilization. So what are the timings for female sterilization? That is within 24 hours to 7 days of the delivery. Then interval sterilization. Suppose she has delivered, she went back home, now she is, suppose she is 1 year after her delivery, she has come back and she wants sterilization. Then how will you convince her? We will ask her that if non-pregnant within 6 weeks or within 7 days of menses. Then post-abortal sterilization, that is missed abortion has been there and all the product of conception has been expelled. Now she is in the hospital, we can do the sterilization in the same setting. And one is cesarean section. During the cesarean section, we do bilateral tubal ligation, that is intracesarean sterilization. And what are the various routes of sterilization? One is you can give an incision on the abdomen and take the 2 tubes and ligate it. This is one method of sterilization. Another method of sterilization is laparoscopic tubal ligation. But it is said that in the immediate postpartum period, if the patient is asking for sterilization, go for open method rather than laparoscopic method. Why? Because these tubes are highly vascular and edematous and may get torn easily. Now case selection criteria. Who are the patients on whom you can do this sterilization? First is females who are within 22 to 45 years of age and males who are below 60 years of age, and they should be married and they should have at least one child of more than 1 year of age, and the patient should know that what kind of an operation she is going to undergo, that is the permanent method of sterilization, what are its effects, what are the side effects, and we should ensure that she is in a sound mind. Whatever advices or whatever counseling you are giving, that she is able to understand that. Suppose you do the ligation and then the patient sues you that you have done my ligation, I was not informed. Or you convince the patient in your own language, the patient does not understand your language, then also it is not fine. If the patient is mentally unsound, if the patient is a minor, then you have to satisfy all the criteria. That she should be 22 to 45 years of age, having one living issue who is more than 1 year of age. She should be married, his sound state of mind. In case of a mentally ill patient, the psychiatrist and legal guardian should be there to consent for the same. And then when should you delay the procedure? Suppose you suspect a pregnancy, or suppose she is within 42 days postpartum, she is having active pelvic inflammatory diseases, or she had PID within last 3 months, she has sexually transmitted disease, active liver or gallbladder disease, CVD or CAD, or complicated heart disease, severe anemia, psychiatric disease, or multiple scars from the previous laparotomies. Now how will you counsel? See, you have to make the patient understand this is a permanent method of contraception. After that, yes, tubal recanalization surgeries can be done, that is reversal of the tubal ligation can be done, but those procedures are risky and the chances of fertility after the recanalization process is very rare. So you have to counsel them that this is a permanent method, this is a surgical procedure. So she might have any anesthetic complication as well as intraoperative or post-operative complications as well, such as wound site infection can be there. She can have any drug allergies, there can be post-operative infections. So you have to counsel her. There is possible failure as well. There are chances that ligation failure might happen. Then there might be complications. And we have to make her understand that ligation prevents pregnancy, but it doesn't prevent sexually transmitted diseases. And reversal is available, but we have to counsel about the pros and cons of the procedure as well. Now, surgical approach are three: mini laparotomy, laparoscopic sterilization, vaginal tubal ligation, and hysteroscopic method of sterilization. Now, mini laparotomy. Mini laparotomy is preferred in those patients who are immediate in the postpartum period, those who have immediately delivered, or those who are in the, that we have studied that she has come with a missed abortion, we have done the dilatation and evacuation, now we do the ligation in the same setting, and interval period as well. In case of a interval sterilization, what we do, empty the stomach, void urine, local anesthetic is given, and 2 to 3 centimeter transverse suprapubic incision is given, which is 2.5 centimeter above the symphysis pubis. And you have to keep the patient for observation for 4 hours, and tubal ligation can be done in most commonly what we use is modified Pomeroy's method or Klipser ligation, Klipser rings, but most commonly what we do is a modified Pomeroy's method. There are various other methods as well, but most commonly what we do is modified Pomeroy's method. And 2 to 3 centimeters subumbilical incision is given. In the postpartum sterilization, what is the difference? Because in immediate postpartum period is what happens, the uterus has still not involuted, the uterus is still not a pelvic organ. Now you can palpate the uterus just below the umbilicus. So will you give the incision 2 to 3 centimeter above the symphysis pubis? No. What will you do? You will give 2 to 3 centimeters subumbilical incision and 2 centimeter below the fundus, so that the tube can be identified. And how will you identify the tube? By the 2 femoral ends, because most of the time what happen in the tubes, we get confused with that of the appendix. Both are a hollow tubular structure. So we have to identify the tubes by tracing from the femoral end. Now the patient, after this ligation has been done, the patient is kept under observation for 4 hours and then discharged. Antibiotic and analgesics are given. Now what we are talking about is most commonly is a modified Pomeroy method. And what are the other different types of methods are Pomeroy, Parkland, Madlener, fimbriectomy, Irving's, Uchida. We will study the details over here. See, in case of a Pomeroy's method, what we do is we hold the tube using a Babcock tube. It's a Babcock tube holding forceps. So we hold the tube, we ligate the tube at its base. See, the tubes are ligated at the base and the upper end is cut. See, the tubes are now ligated. This is using a catgut suture, which it becomes difficult when, suppose there is some previous history of PID and the tubes are adhered to the behind the back of the uterus, or with the there is a tube ovarian mass, then you cannot hold the tube like this, na. You cannot find an avascular structure over here so that you can pass the suture and ligate the base. So it becomes difficult in case of previous tubal adhesions. Now coming to Madlener. What happens in Madlener is just the tubes are held in the same way. Here the tubes are held with a Babcock forceps, here also the tubes will be held with a Babcock forceps. And then what we do, you apply an artery forceps at the base of the tube and crush the base of the tube and ligate it with a silk. We do not cut or remove any portion of the tube. Here we are removing a cut and see the tubes are separated like this. So chances of failure is less. But here what happens? We have just crushed the base and ligated. No portion of the tube has been removed. So as a result of what? There might be the suture might get loose and there might be a chances of failure as well. So Madlener method has high failure rate. Now see, this is the Parkland method. In Parkland method, what happens is, see, through the mesosalpines, here one suture is passed, here one suture is passed. Both the ends of the tubes are first suture ligated, then one end was cut. So this difference between Pomeroy and Parkland is what? See, in Parkland what happens? Two tubes are ligated together and then removed. Here one end is ligated, another end is ligated, and then the mid portion is removed. In case of Kroner's fimbriectomy, the highest failure rate, what we do, only the fimbrias are cut. Still, if the ovulation occurs, this ova can still be picked up and transported to the ampulla, and implantation and fertilization still can occur. Now coming to this Irving's technique. Irving technique has a very low failure rate. Why very low failure rate? Because see, one end of the tube is cut and the proximal end of the tube is buried within the myometrium of the uterus, and another end is ligated and kept above the mesosalpinx. So, these two tubes are kept away from each other, there is no chances of recanalization. So, the failure rate is very less, and in case of Uchida technique, what happens is normal saline is injected within the mesosalpinx. See, the mesosalpinx has swelled up now. Now, the both ends of the tubes are ligated. One end is buried inside the mesosalpinx and another end is kept free. Here also see, these two tubes are so at a distance from each other, the chances of recanalization is almost nil. So, for these two methods, the failure rates are very less. Whereas, what was happening in Madlener? See, tubes are very close together, right? In any case of a ligature slippage or anything, it regains its normal anatomy. So, chances of failure was more. Here is also the chances of failure is very high. See, only the femoral portion has been removed, nothing else is removed. Still she can ovulate and the ova can travel the tube and get fertilized and implanted. Now, laparoscopic sterilization. So, what are the advantages of laparoscopic sterilization? We can directly visualize the tubes and manipulate them. In case of any adhesion is there, any tubo-ovarian mass is there, we can easily get them operated and manipulate the tube. It is associated with pelvic and abdominal abnormality detected. It can be easily treated at the same point of time. And hospitalization for a prolonged period of time is not required. It has got cosmetic advantages as well. See, only two small ports are done and the ligation has been done, right? There is no scar on the abdomen. And minimum post-operative pain and discomfort is there, and reversibility more after clip application. Now, what happens? How do we do? See, this is the only two ports are required, right? Entering the abdomen within a Veress needle, we can put the direct trocar or open laparoscopy. Now, what are the methods? Most common method is Fallop ring. Laparoscopically also we can do by using rings, we can use using clips, or we can do electrocoagulation of the tubes. This is a Fallop ring. Fallop ring is most commonly being used for tubal ligation laparoscopically. Now, coming to hysteroscopic tubal ligation. How will you do ligation hysteroscopically, or female, rather we should say hysteroscopic female sterilization. Here we do not ligate. Here what happened, hysteroscopic inside into the uterine cavity, both the uterine cavity can be examined, and when both the cornu and the tubes are examined, what happened, we insert an Essure. Essure is a coil like device. This coil like device is passed into the tubal ostium. As a result of which, what happens, outer coil is larger in the uterine cavity, and see, it is the uterotubal junction. See, it blocks this entire passage. As a result, this is a foreign body, it is made up of titanium and nickel. What happens, it produces a foreign body reaction. As a result, there is inflammation. As a result, what happens, these tubes get blocked. See, this is a fibrotic tissue reaction. And after the Essure insertion also, we ask the patient to use a backup method of contraception for at least 3 months. Why for 3 months? Because after that we then hysterosalpingogram is done to confirm the occlusion. What we do after this Essure device is placed, we discharge the patient and ask her to come back after 3 months. Within this 3 months, what will happen? There will be fibrotic reaction and both the tubes will be blocked. And how will you check? You will push a dye and take an X-ray. What you will see, that due to fibrosis and reaction, what has happened, these two cornuas and the tubes has been blocked. There is no spillage of the dye. So, this acts as a contraceptive device. It induces bilateral tubal block. As a result, the sperm cannot meet the ova. So, failure. Now, typical failure, what we were talking about, see. For laparoscopic ring, it is only 0.2 to 0.3% failure rate. And in case of Irving's and Uchida, what we studied, one of the tube was inserted within the myometrium and the tube was in the mesosalpinx. So, there was so much distance between those tubes that they cannot get recanalized. So, the failure rate is so less in case of Irving, see 0.1%, and Pomeroy's is 3%, whereas Madlener and fimbriectomy, what was it? Madlener was crushing the base, and Kroner's fimbriectomy, only the fimbria was cut out. See, the failure rate is more. Now, what are the causes of failure? Is due to recanalization, due to incomplete division, due to incomplete occlusion, ligation of the round ligaments in case of the tubes, and presence of early pregnancy. Now, we have to talk about the male sterilization. How will you do male sterilization? That is vasectomy. But most popular method of doing vasectomy is no scalpel vasectomy, where no scalpel is being used. See, how will you do no scalpel vasectomy? Using the left hand and index, see, this is the index finger and thumb, we have to palpate the vas in front of the middle and the behind and midway between top of the testis and base of the penis. See, this is how the vas is palpated. Now, perpendicularly on the skin, overlying the vas, give an incision and puncture the skin. And see, elevate the vas using a dissecting forceps. See, we have a vas, this is known as vas dissecting ring forceps. Using this, the vas is grasped and taken out through that small incision. And after that, 1 centimeter of the vas is made free and mobilized and cut. See, segment in between them is, these two segments has been removed. We have taken this vas difference out through this small incision, and after that what we have done is, we have removed a segment of the vas difference, and it causes what we have, same in about 3 months or after 20 ejaculation, that there is attainment of sterility. Semen analysis is done at 16 weeks one test, or at 12 weeks and 16 weeks if you want to do 2 tests. Declare sterile if 2 consecutive semen analysis shows absence of spermatozoa. This is very important. We have to ask the patient that after the operation has been done, use a backup method of contraception for at least 3 months or after 20 ejaculation. And after 3 months, what we do an semen analysis and see the presence of spermatozoa into it. And that person is declared sterile if 2 consecutive semen analysis shows absence of spermatozoa. And other techniques, most common technique and what is done in government setups are no scalpel vasectomy. Other methods which can be used are using chemical sclerosing agents, occlusive plugs, intravasal devices as well. So, these were the methods of male and female sterilization as well as different types of implants.